COP26. So the paper is there for people to look at. From a regional perspective, we worked on this and we coordinated a small group of regional partners over the past 6 months with a clear set of objectives. First of all, we wanted to raise the profile of the region for trade and investment opportunities. Secondly, we wanted to just create a buzz, and I think we saw, didn't we, over those 2 weeks, that there was quite a national buzz in the whole region to encourage businesses and citizens to take decarbonisation very seriously as an issue, and so that has happened too. And the third objective was to build our partnership with central government, particularly to use the opportunity to seek enhanced powers and resources at a local and regional level. So those were the objectives. That's what we thought we could get as a region, if you like, from COP26. In the note, you will see through sections 2.4, 2.5, 6, 7, 8, what happened at COP itself. I'm not going to go through all of those details, but it's a really useful summary. I'm sure people have read summaries in the newspapers and so on, but there is a summary there as to what was achieved. I want to just focus our attention this morning on, from a sort of West Midlands point of view, as to what we did and how we have sort of benefited from COP26. There were a couple of things really. One is that, well, prior to COP26, we pulled together working with the Growth Company, a low carbon prospectus. I haven't got my physical copy to wave around, but it's available online. And I think that's been quite a helpful first start, if you like, in setting out why we think the West Midlands is the home of the Green Industrial Revolution, to coin that particular phrase. And it sets out 3 or 4 areas where we have some really unique regional strengths, some of which we've actually talked about today as we visited Ties the Energy Park. So that was produced and that was used in activities both in Glasgow and then regionally. So in terms of Glasgow, I went up for a day to talk about green investment. Then the Mayor went up and was involved in a series of events that are set out in paragraph 2.13. And then regionally, on a particular day, there were a number of regional roadshows. The one I want to mention in particular, though there was a particularly good couple of days in Coventry as well. The one I want to mention in particular is the Wolverhampton meeting at the University of Wolverhampton, where we had about 120, perhaps even more than 150 people who gathered for the day. We had some fantastic showcasing of local businesses. There were thematic workshops on a number of topics. What I think is probably one of the most significant things, again, linked to our meeting here today and the fact that we're at Ties the Energy Park, was the first meeting of what we're describing as a net zero infrastructure delivery panel, where we brought together some of the main utilities, if I might call them those, Western Power Distribution, Cadent, National Grid, Energy Capital, a variety of Severn Trent, and their commitment was then to work together. They will invest vast amounts of money in the energy infrastructure in the region, and we need to be able to coordinate that more effectively if we're going to make the kind of energy systems that we've been talking about this morning operate effectively. So that for me was a really significant first step, and we now need to build on that as we develop that panel, that group of people. So I think a really significant day in Wolverhampton, really, really good event there. There's some notes in here about press coverage, social media activity, in terms of that buzz that I think we tried to create. I think certainly from a combined authority perspective, we were very pleased with the amount of press and social media that came out of COP26. And then finally, in terms of next steps, paragraph 2.18 or 2.17 basically tells us, as we know, COP27 is going to be in Egypt. And countries are going to be expected to provide much more detail as to what they're going to do to hit the NDC commitments that they've made. Just in terms of what we're doing regionally, quite a few meetings came out of COP26, which are now leading to further bilateral meetings, particularly around investment, finance and so on. So we're pursuing those. There were some interesting conversations. There was a UK, what was it called? UK Climate Change Investment Commission, led by Greg Clark, that basically recommended the Net Zero Neighbourhood Demonstrator programme that we're actually running. So we're now being able to pick up that at a national level and talk about those kind of conversations as well. All kinds of stuff coming out of the regional roadshow. Again, post-COVID, it was so good to see people exchanging business cards and just talking to each other and saying, well, perhaps we should meet up. And then I've had a number of meetings on the back of that. We're looking at some more international collaborations as well. So again, a number of opportunities, for example, with the Chief Minister of Maharashtra in India. There's a link there that we can possibly build on. A couple of others as well that we're pursuing. And then there was a really interesting youth panel. And again, I think we're looking at how we develop more work with young people, university students and so on the back of that. And then there's a whole bunch of now post-COP activities and events that are coming up, including the University of Birmingham's Forum for Global Challenges next year, which is another big opportunity for us. There's investor events, there's a Midlands Engine youth event coming up too. So there's a whole bunch of things that are now kind of coming on the other side of COP26. So it's not just a one-off thing, it's part of a drumbeat of how we continue to raise the profile of net zero issues, opportunities for the low carbon economy in the West Midlands. So that's just an introduction to that paper.
Okay, thank you. Just a couple of points on this. I mean, it was COP26 for you. It was COVID for me. It was for 10 days, which was rather unfortunate, but I'm sorry I couldn't be with you physically or take part in some of those. 2 or 3 points here. I mean, a question for you really is, you refer to the buzz of the COP week, which, and certainly it hit the headlines, and you know, I think, you know, quite frankly, the region did a great job. In my opinion, the region did a great job in all its facets in doing COP, both, you know, at regional level. We did something locally, I'm sure many others have done. How does one maintain that buzz? Because you know what, yeah, we're doing a bit here and a bit there, but that buzz, that's a question that I've got for you. The second thing is specifically it refers to social media output, 215 bullet 2. The outright winning choice from this poll about people behaviours was recycle and reuse more, which is good. There's also reference to greener transport and eating a more plant-based diet, all of which is good stuff, and all of which will have an effect. But one of the things I keep raising, the issue of local, the word local, because you know, if you have some beef from Warwickshire, it might well be more energy sympathetic than a lettuce from wherever lettuce comes from when they come in by plane or whatever. But the point is, you know, we in the Midlands first of all, we're in the centre of the UK. You know, we have the heritage, we have the history of you know, of industry and tech. We've got all those things, which seem to me to blend very well with local. I don't necessarily mean, you know, from Berkswell or something. I'm thinking about local. It could be West Midlands, or it could be in the UK. At least it's not flying or importing stuff. And I'll just leave you with those two for the moment.
So just to respond to those two things, the first thing to say is that in terms of sustaining that buzz, and particularly picking up some of the issues around individual behaviour change or household behaviour change, we do now have a behaviour change programme, and I think you should probably bring a paper to this board fairly soon about that. We work with the Behavioural Insights team to identify 3 campaigns that we want to particularly pursue in the near future, and we are currently working in the background to develop those campaigns and look at exactly how they're going to work. One of which, I think, Jackie, correct me if I'm wrong, is around food.
Yes.
And that will include a local dimension, and that links to the Commonwealth Games as well. So let's bring a paper back to this board and to share with you the kind of more detailed plans on what we plan to do on behaviour change in a sustained way.
Okay, well, can I just follow that? That's great to hear. What I'd like to see coming from that, though, is some messages that certainly the politicians around the room, but we as organisations can push out. So, you know, some simple messages you didn't politicians it, you know, that we can push out.
Yep.
You know, because what's shown from the COVID world is, and any, you know, if people can find a reason for not doing, they will, particularly if it hurts them. And some of the things that are needed will hurt a bit. Okay.
I think Matthew wants to come in on that, and I've got one more thing to say as well.
I was going to just pick up on the point about local, because there's a question to the combined authority really. So what this comes down to from an economic perspective in terms of encouraging local people to buy local and so on, I think in a technical sense, with apologies for going in this direction, but it's the way we monitor, we measure carbon in products, in foodstuffs, in industrial products and everything else. The way as a country we choose to do that, so the technical details of carbon monitoring methodologies, which is where my apology comes in, is absolutely critical to encouraging people to buy local, as is our kind of procurement rules. So the question to the combined authority is, are we getting involved in any kind of national discussions about how those things are going to be developed? Because the Midlands, this was the point that you made, like speaking about as the Midlands, that's potentially our big competitive advantage. So very different topic from behaviour.
No, absolutely. So I'm probably going to say what Jackie or Richard are about to say, but
no, I wasn't going to say anything. I was just going to point out that Councillor Zafar has his hand up when you're done. Ed.
Okay, fine. So I think the straightforward answer, unless Richard's going to correct me, the straightforward answer to your question, Matthew, is no, I'm not aware of being involved in those kind of conversations, but we can certainly pursue that and perhaps have a further conversation about precisely the detail and where we need to get involved.
Okay.
But just generally about the local and the local food production side of things, if you remember when we published the circular economy route map in September, there were 3 main themes that we wanted to focus on, one of which is about food distribution and local food. And so again, colleagues have had a couple of months to start working on what does that program need to look like, and I think we could again feedback here in due course as to exactly what we're going to do around that.
Okay, I mean, we can have discussions with people, or we can actually make the case ourselves and push the case, and I think we should be pushing the case. Councillor Zafar.
Thanks, Ian. Thank you for the paper and obviously the report. A lot was going on during that particular period of time, and I know some of us, particularly the mayor, were challenged by COVID, and obviously his arrival at COP was delayed because of COVID. I'm surprised that there's no mention in the report of the Hydroflex project. It was a very important development, not just for ourselves, but for the country as a whole. The first mainland hydrogen run train, where the technology and the science has been developed at the University of Birmingham in partnership with Porterbrook. I was at COP for a particular day and joined Lord Valimura and others for the meetings on the train, and managed to travel on that. So I think that is really important. So whilst it's really important that the work of the combined authorities highlighted, I think it's also we need to acknowledge what other partners are doing across the region, and that for me was very important. Particularly, you're sat at Tyseley Energy Park, where the hydrogen buses, which will go live, I think next week, will be refueled there regularly. So it's very important that we look at a variety of zero emission technologies that are being developed, and I know that we're certainly here in Birmingham, we're really looking at how we can push the hydrogen economy and how we can support that in our efforts for to get to net zero as well. But overall, I think it was really well done. The road show really worked well as well. There was some very good coverage of that. Thank you.
We have just seen the hydrogen buses refueled, several of them. We watched them come in. Good to see.
Yeah, just simply to say, I mean, Councillor Zafar, you're absolutely right that the Hydroflex train, the Viva Rail electric train as well, though they were key features of the programme in Glasgow, and actually a lot of the media coverage was around that. And just to say, it is referenced in the paper, forgive me, in paragraph 2.1.3. So there is reference there, but Councillor Zapp is absolutely right. That was a key part of the Glasgow element.
I certainly mentioned it myself on something I was doing. I can't remember what it was, but that was one of the things I referred to. Peter?
Thank you, Chair. Certainly support and agree with what Wazim has just mentioned about more zero technologies and hydroflex. And when you mentioned about the behaviour change programme, was very much welcome to see that through the Chair. They paper coming. I think one nice thing is actually seeing some potential examples, because as the Chair has alluded to, that people don't automatically jump on various things, but I think that when they see examples, when they see the benefits and potential savings, and then are seeing that they're part of a scheme, which then hopefully encourages them to talk to other people. Those are sort of things that we say, and I've always thought that the more people see the benefits of doing something, and the benefits they will take personally for themselves and their families and others in the community, I think that does encourage people more to join on things. Thank you, Chair.
That's really important, and it builds on what's been said already. I mean, one of the things with the environment, its opportunities, its benefits, because I still get people say, why are we bothering? You know, there's more important things to do than the press this. And, you know, I mean, as with all these things, it's a matter of where you put your money, but some things don't cost. And the more we can influence people to seize these opportunities and benefits, and heavens, we've probably got one. I haven't looked. I mean, perhaps Wazim can help, but you know, in terms of clean air zones, I don't know much about the Birmingham Clean Air Zone. But to me, one of the things I'm always talking about is, you know, this business is not just about carbon neutrality. It's about air pollution and making a better, you know, cutting out those 1,000 excess deaths we get for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and just on that, sorry, Ed, apologies. Absolutely. Today is 6 months to the day that we launched the Birmingham Clean Air Zone, and I've been doing some media this morning, and we'll be doing some this afternoon. And thus far, it's been a huge success. Very early in the new year, we'll be publishing some data in terms of air quality. Again, working with University of Birmingham and DEFRA to capture the benefits of the reduction of air quality. We know that there's been a massive increase in compliant vehicles going through the clean air zone, so behavioural change is really happening. Obviously, the challenges with local public transport have slightly hindered our progress, but we're all working together to try and address them and ensure we get as many people as possible on cleaner and greener journeys into Birmingham. But I think the next phase is, you know, we're getting to legally compliant levels in Birmingham city centre. That's not good enough. We need to ensure we've got safe levels in every single neighbourhood in our city, in every single neighbourhood across the region, and it's how we can utilise the revenue that's generated from the clean air zone to support other initiatives across the city, which is going to be absolutely vital for us at the next stages.
And you and I had a discussion, Wazim, in Birmingham City next to a hydrogen bus about cross-country transport, cross region. You know, obviously I've pushed it for Solihull because we're very car-based, but you've got the same issue around Birmingham, and you know we need this cross transport as well, which is going to be vital for those communities.
Yeah, cross-city buses are coming forward. Obviously, we've got the first sprint route from Walsall to Solihull, which will come live by the games, which will be a major development. But the cross-city bus routes that Transport West Midlands are working on and leading on are going to be essential. You're absolutely right.
Okay.
Just a couple of responses to those comments. In terms of exemplars, you're absolutely right. You know, the part of the thinking behind the Net Zero Neighbourhood Demonstrator Programme is that we will actually create whole green communities, if I might call them that, where people will be able to see, this is what it might look like in the future. And so that's a key part. So people can visit those places and say, right, well, we could do our street now, and I can see how this is going to work and so on. So that's one example, but there's many others. On the behaviour change, what's really interesting from the research that Behaviour Insights team did in the West Midlands with their survey, I think it was 2,000 people they surveyed, was that to talk about the health benefits of the net zero transition was the most compelling way that we could persuade people to take net zero action, rather than sort of banging them over the head with carbon stats or telling them that there's an economic opportunity or whatever. Actually, it was the health benefits that most lead people to action. So that's quite interesting. And then just on air quality, just as a very brief update, obviously the Environment Act has now been passed. We brought the air quality options paper to the board last time, but it was delayed whilst we delayed in going to the full Combined Authority Board whilst we waited for the Act to be passed. So it now looks as though it's going to go to the full Combined Authority Board in February. That's the latest plan. So just to give a brief update.
Okay, my challenge actually is for the next paper is to demonstrate and bring out, as if I were to give it to, let's say, a member of the public, because ultimately they get it, I think, yeah, and certainly they get the minutes, as to how they can grasp it fairly quickly onto those benefits, those opportunities, and the exemplars that have been talked about. Because I think, I mean, there's two elements to this. One is the population, you know, the people, but actually the other element is the business population, the community. And, you know, in the end, they're the people we want hooked into this, big and small, because tech is going to, I think, is going to be vital for all this. Okay, any other comments on this paper? So summing up, it was, we think it was a great success. We need to keep it going. That's it. And my thanks to everybody for the tremendous effort, both in terms of the CA, but across the region, for everything that they did to try and bring us focus. All right, so I will, in that case, if I'm okay with that, we'll move on to natural environment update, which is it Jackie or is it Mike?
Yes,
Mike,
mainly Mike,
is
and
round-
then a little bit me at the end. So Mike, no one can see you currently, so
Okay, I think you got to get the line.
I think you're going to have to go sit down there, and then
How will I view the slides?
so Richard's going to share
Here, if you like,
his
you have to sit next to
screen
me.
with everyone on the call and turn it round so everyone in the room
Do you want
can see it.
There you go, Mike.
Yeah.
They could see that with the one anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, Councillor Course has got a copy there.
That's brilliant.
It's not in colour, it's on draft.
Fine. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's good to be here this morning. My first meeting since taking up the role. So just on the first slide, just a quick summary of the Environment Act. We've been waiting for the Environment Bill to get boiler sent for a couple of years now. It's taken its time. We did get boiler sent a couple of weeks back, 10th of November, and it's a very complex act. There's a lot in there. So in summary, just to give you the overview, it sets long-term targets to improve air quality, biodiversity and water quality, and it will take steps to contribute to waste reduction and resource efficiency. And it also sets in place strategies and mechanisms to deliver those points. It also sets out a schedule for greater monitoring and reporting on environmental matters. And it's set up an environmental watchdog, a new body called the Office for Environmental Protection. And that is pretty much in place currently. That's based in Worcester. So I suspect they will be pretty busy in the coming years. So moving on to local nature recovery strategies. Part of the Environment Act has highlighted the requirement to develop local nature recovery strategies. And the core purpose of this is to help reverse the ongoing decline of nature and biodiversity across England. It's an English-based provision. But it's also, if you're providing gains for nature and biodiversity, you've also got other nature-based services, which are really important for us. So you've got climate change mitigation, tree planting, so sequestration of carbon. You've got natural flood management. We've seen a lot of recent action towards creating habitats in floodplains so we can slow down the flow of water into the drainage systems and improvement of water quality. And of course, there's an increasingly recognised benefit of green space for people's well-being and healthy communities, and that's quite a focus for us. So what do we know about them? They are new, and the programme is that they will be in place in 2 years' time, so that the key delivery from the local nature recovery strategy is providing a mechanism to deliver biodiversity net gain, which is part of the Environment Act. There will be full English coverage, and Natural England will be coordinating round about 50 strategies. So they've got to have their hands full. So at the moment, DEFRA are contacting what they call responsible authorities now to talk about who's going to lead these regional strategies. And typically they'll be at an authority level, so they're talking to us as a combined authority, or even at county level across much of England. So at the moment, we haven't got a great deal of detail on methods and process and even a timetable other than 2 years' time they need to be in place. Natural England did run with a pilot project last year, and they tested 5 pilot areas. Those are complete, and those strategies have been a useful guide as to how to take things forward. And there were a few lessons learned from that pilot study. And just to run over those things, the pilot study, the general contents of the recovery strategy is it's a map of the most important areas, so designated sites and areas that we know are really important for wildlife and nature. And then you would look at setting out specific proposals for creating and improving habitat for nature and wider climate resilience. So this is about our aspirations and where we're going to put our effort in protecting and restoring our natural assets. And then the next phase is agreeing the priorities for that recovery. So what was learned from the pilots? Well, they need strong leadership from the responsible authority, because there is such a wide range of input needed from various organisations. This can be local authorities, it can be charity-based organisations, a lot of consultees to shepherd in this process. Resourcing needs to be adequate, and that can be resourcing in terms of staffing, but also expertise. It will call upon expertise in terms of mapping and analysis. So that's important to be in place. We need to have good and accessible data. One thing they did discover in the pilot was that a lot of information is out there, but it needs to be developed and presented in a way that people can interpret and actually utilise. And the end users of the strategies need to be thought about in the process when you're pulling it together, because again, it has to be a usable document to focus effort going forwards. So that's the local nature recovery strategy. Just move on to the next slide, Rich. So another area we're currently working on is the community green grant. You'll see from the extract of the plan there are various shades of green. I won't go into detail, but in essence, where you've got dark green, you've got greater levels of accessibility to natural green space, which is, of course, really important for people and wildlife. So the key objectives of the Green Grant is to increase or improve green spaces close to people and giving them access to those green spaces. It's to connect those people to nature, and in particular, those communities that are deprived in terms of accessibility, and it's to enhance the local environment. Also, you know, some of those other nature-based services we've been talking about. Next slide, Rich. Thank you, thank you. So the scheme itself, we're currently working through and developing, but in essence, there will be small grants of £3,000 to £25,000, which we would envisage to be small community groups in general, local projects, and then there will be larger grants of £25,000 to £100,000, which I suspect will be heading more towards more strategic projects, maybe with some of the bigger conservation charities. So the administration of the scheme is currently progressing, and we're setting this up. And we've undertaken some awareness raising of the grant already, and a number of community groups have expressed interest. So some of that groundwork is definitely on the way. And we're heading towards a launch in January next year. So I can hand over to Jackie now.
Yeah. So sorry, I'm sitting just a little bit off camera, but it's only one slide. One of the other things that we're looking to do is to develop some work with the Woodland Trust. So they got in touch with us around setting up a West Midlands forest partnership, just because of the ambition in our 5-year plan around tree planting. So we had a call with the natural capital leads in the local authorities, and people were keen for us to collaborate in that way. So we've pursued the submission of that bid, which went in last week. And what it will help us do is draw on the expertise from the Woodland Trust in terms of setting up a forest partnership. They've got a similar model running in Essex. And to support that, we'll also fund the appointment of a West Midlands Forest Partnership Coordinator. So someone who can really lead and push forward our work on tree planting, particularly around collaboration and coordination on that. The Black Country Consortium ran a really good data collection initiative called iTree, which has recently reported. And that was, or that enabled a really good data source around trees in the West Midlands. And so we've also put funding in to extend that out to Birmingham, Solihull and Coventry as well, so that we've got that data right across the combined authority. We want to, and this was in our natural environment plan, run a summit with landowners, so to look at where private land might be available for tree planting. So we've put some budget in for that, and also the work around behaviour change, public engagement as well. So that bid, we should find out if we've been successful by the end of January. So we'll bring an update to the board, but it was just to let you know that that was something that we were working on.
Okay, I wasn't wanting to come in, but I've got a number of questions of my own on this. And I mean, it's good that we've got the environmental bill through. I think the concern, I have 2 or 3 concerns over things over this. One of which is I'm not clear, and nobody's advised about its relationship with planning policy. Because I mean, we can do a lot of work on access to green space, but as new development comes through, you know, I've got an examination in public on a local plan at the moment where I know, you know, I'm a bit under attack because I want to, you know, make better standards of green space, but because planning policy is unclear, you know, it's quite difficult to do that. But that's a specific question. But Mike, I want to just understand some of this, you know, the new recovery, what they call local nature recovery strategy. I mean, local nature partnerships existed. I mean, do they still exist?
Yes.
Do they? Okay, you might have one here. I don't know whether we have, and I've only been doing this for a few years. So that system didn't work, and I'll be interested to see whether this system will work. But you've mentioned authority level, and then you've talked about county level. I mean, you have not mentioned whether it's districts or unitaries, which of course are the 7 people that populate the combined authority. And I think, you know, there's an issue there. Who is the delivery partner? Because a lot of what the framework has come out, I mean, I see lots of plans and I see lots of need for data, but as far as my council is concerned, I'm sure I speak for others, we're actually out there doing this stuff. And I'm not clear as to whether there's going to be an overlap and who is doing what, because you know, we need to be sure as to what well, as an authority, combined authority, what our role is, and actually there is a great role there, but we've just got to be clear what it is, and what the role of the individual, well, the 7 Mets, but in fact it's non-cons as well, because you know, what's absent from all this is any timescales, any you know, any programs for actually doing the work, and we can keep peddling the strategies and the data and everything else. But what we do know is that every year that goes by, we aren't planting those trees and providing that natural environment is digging a bigger environmental hole. And frankly, I'm not interested in anything else other than the work on the ground. And I know you've got a lot to do with stuff to get to that. So I'd like just comments on that before I invite anyone else to come in.
Okay, that's fine. So I think the first point relates to planning, where this fits in. The reality is Natural England aren't entirely certain of that. So I think this strategy, the way it will fit into the process, it will be an overarching strategy that is providing a suggested route of where we will be looking at our recovery and where things should happen. In terms of protection of existing assets, those features are already identified through the planning process. So SSSI, statutory sites and non-statutory wildlife sites will always be a feature of local planning policy, and those will drop into the local nature recovery strategy. What we would be looking at in the strategy, however, is where we can provide extra resilience and protection to those features in terms of identifying opportunities for habitat creation and enhancement. There's also a big role to play in defining the best areas for biodiversity net gain compensation. So BNG, biodiversity net gain, is part of the planning process going forward. It's always, for the last 2 years, it's been part of national planning policy and it's been part of some local planning policy. It will be mandated in 2 years' time. So this is part of the delivery mechanism for that. I don't anticipate it will be a document that will influence the way local plans are shaped or change the way they're shaped. I think it will sit alongside and give a focus at a cross-border level as to where action should be taken.
But can I just, because before you go on to the next part, I just want to pick up on it. You say certain features protection will be dropped into the new system.
Yeah.
But the current features of protection, as I understand it, you can get tree preservation orders, you can get SSSIs, you can have national parks, you can have all of those things.
Yeah.
But actually, they're very limited. I mean, for instance, Greenbelt is not about green; it's about coalescence and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And you know, we've seen a loss of species over the last 20 years, which is dramatic. And I thought accepted thinking was that part of the reason for that was the lack of connecting up spaces. I mean, I've seen spaces that are being done across the West, how we're actually trying to connect up spaces, you know, and what is the value of an existing hedgerow and an existing natural feature? I don't think that's protected, and it's not that easy necessarily. You can do TPOs and stuff, but hedgerows, the value of, I don't know whether any of what's coming through is addressing those issues.
Right, okay. I think it's a really good observation, because what we have been good at historically is looking after islands of protected sites and not necessarily the wider countryside. So the way the Environment Act has provided, not necessarily protection of features, but trying to cover the bases in terms of gradual declines through development is a brought-in biodiversity net gain. And that process encourages the retention of higher value habitats in the development process, but also you've got to walk away with more than you started with before you developed. So the local nature recovery strategy will be providing a targeting system as to where you need to put that effort.
I got that point. Okay. My second broad thing about who does what.
So local nature partnerships, they have played a role in the last few years, and they have done some good work. It's brought people together, and they have provided a focus.
More talking. They brought people together. Sorry, if this is in the public domain, I'm not going to apologise.
Not the likes of it.
No,
no, it's not your. It isn't for you. I'm just making a point.
So I think where they fit in, they provide an existing network of organisations and bodies who will inevitably be consultees in this process.
Okay. It's the delivery partners now. That's the question that, who does what, and the 7 Mets and all that stuff.
Okay, yeah. So there will be the usual run of stakeholders, key stakeholders, in terms of developing this plan. Your question regarding districts and counties, that is still yet to be defined. So DEFRA will be looking at a map of England. So the fine detail is maybe still to be worked out in terms of exact boundaries. But traditionally, when it comes to strategies like this, it would be at a county scale. And I think in the West Midlands, because of the breakdown of authorities, they've come to us as a combined authority. So it's unlikely to work at district level because it's too small. It's about larger scale and more strategic thinking. And it's probably not going to be bigger than county level. So it's kind of where it fits in who can organise in different locations.
I mean, I just a coincidence. I have a map in front of me, which means that we may be too small, but you actually look at it. You've got Coventry, you got Solihull, you got Birmingham, then you got the Black Country.
Yeah.
When we talk about counties, it's totally irrelevant to the West Midlands. Totally, and you aren't going to get anywhere unless you get the collaboration of the districts. And I'm sorry, speaking for Solihull, I'm not ceding anything, and I'll tell it to anybody until I have something that's better. So I know I'm not having a go at you, Mike. I'm having a go. Would I have a go at anybody? And it looks as though he's going to jump in in response. But
I mean, I think the realpolitik of the situation is that DEFRA are talking to West Midlands Combined Authority, irrespective of what they'd be doing elsewhere in the country, and saying that they think we have the best bet, not as a combined authority per se, but as a 7 Met area, we have the best bet at pulling something together here. I think it then is beholden upon, if they are going to designate the combined authority area as the area, it's then beholden on Mike and Jackie and the rest of us to make sure that we involve our local authority partners and indeed the other stakeholders to really make the best fist of this latest initiative.
Okay, I'm desperate to get.
It was just quickly on that point, because it follows on that the one thing on the call with Natural England, there is a lot of detail that are still waiting from DEFRA, but Emma, who we spoke to, who's the West Midlands coordinator, was very clear that they want to nail the geographies down fairly urgently. So that was just the feedback from her.
But it is a key point here, because who is the delivery partner? I mean, we can talk till cows come home, but who in the end is going to do the work? And I think there is a blended role here that will work very, very well. But I've been working with Birmingham, well, not me personally, so for forever, because we have rivers that connect and so on, and Coventry and Warwickshire. But the wider I get it, and also the power of the media. But we just got to get this right. Right, what's in?
Thanks, Ian. Absolutely want to endorse what you've said about expectations of different partners. Who's expected to do what is really, really important. So absolutely endorse you on that. I just want to make a point. Obviously, the value of green and blue space in neighborhoods has gone through the roof during the pandemic. We saw how important they were, and it's really important that we continue to support those communities. And the community green grants is really important. But I just want to ensure that we're emphasising that as much resource as possible into areas where there's been a low level, historically low level take up of activities related to green space and where the inequalities exist. So in Birmingham, we've got areas where we've got, a lot of green space. In some of the more densely populated areas, my ward's probably one of those where there's very limited green space. It's really important that we support those neighbourhoods and those communities, with access to green space related to green activities related to green space and blue space were available too, and prioritise those areas over areas which have historically had a lot of activity, haven't got some of the health challenges that other areas have. So I just want to ensure that we're focusing our resource in the right place. £750,000 might seem a lot, but in the big scheme of things, it's not. And we just need to prioritise those particular neighbourhoods that need the right level of support. Thank you.
Could I add to that? Just to provide a little bit of reassurance, I've been running through selection criteria, and there's a factor that relates to deprivation from green areas. So if an area has less access at the current time, it will score higher on that particular aspect. So there is a definite recognition of that. On top of that, we are reaching out to those communities to make sure they're supported and encouraged en route to making the application. So yeah, absolutely, really important to us.
I think we'll buy in with this. It just has to be the way. The only thing I'm not sure about is the definition of community. Because, I mean, if I quote my own North Solihull as an example, if you actually, categorise the areas, North Solihull has more green space than urban Solihull. There is masses of it. But then when you get into the local communities, and I have 3 wards there, you actually find that you have sub-communities, you have, and realistically, a piece of green space that is technically in that area, but is half a mile away, maybe, is actually not considered as being in there. So it's understand how you define what I'd say is the appropriate area of the community. But the point you make, I mean, is all accepted.
One thing we can do is to share the NEF, the New Economics Foundation mapping link. Yeah. Which shows you, it creates that definition, then it shows you exactly the neighbourhoods that we're targeting. So perhaps we can share that around.
Yeah, I mean, in many cases, I think you're going to find it's the art of the possible, because, what you're going to do, demolish some houses and create a green space. It's not like that, is it? But there might be other ways around it. Maybe signposting in some. I don't mean physical signs, but making more attractive accesses. So I think there are things we can do.
Thank you, Chair. I would certainly endorse what Wazim said earlier, because I've written down here green spaces in wards throughout the West Midlands, because you, as the Chair has alluded to, as a former borough and county councillor for Warwickshire, that I can see where the Chair is coming from, particularly green spaces, because a lot of people are working on things already from parish to borough to county, and then you've got obviously Warwickshire and places which are very rural in area, and of course it's trying to actually find out what they're already doing at the moment and see what potential linkages there could be on there. Because Wazim made a very good point, because 725k sounds a lot of money, but when you spread it out through the West Midlands, with the seven Mets and the non-coms, it suddenly then just shrinks down to, in respect in pennies, but not trying to put a negative on it. It's just trying to spin it into a positive way. And it's also where Wazim actually talked about deprived areas. I have a few deprived areas in my ward, and Wazim more so in other areas, for example, in Birmingham. And it's really trying to pin down, as we sort of using that lovely word deep dive, actually looking into those small areas and identifying those green spaces, which then, Chair, actually then hopefully will drag and include and involve the communities from deprived areas upwards, because I think one of the fears that people have, Mike, is that when you've talked about 725k, all of a sudden that money could disappear, and then apathy will come back in, because the areas that we were really pushing for within communities gets lost within the ether. So, but well done on what you're doing here. It's very good. Thank you.
I think it's an important point there about grassroots organisation, whatever they are, because you know, you could spend that money very quickly on a bunch of consultants drawing up a plan. On the other hand, you might well find there's an organisation, you know, of volunteers where a little bit of money actually does a lot of good, because you can do a lot in the natural world with not a lot of money if you've got volunteers, and most of the money goes to staff, you know, in people time and things like that. So I hope that, you know, again, we'll be looking at best value for money through those means. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Any other questions? Am I clear on the virtual hands? I mean, all in all, I think there's great potential that could come out of this if we do it in a way that you know, gets the end game, which is green stuff on the ground, rather than the process that goes into it. And that's what I think we all want to see. So I think, can we just you know, those things that we mentioned, can we just focus on? I know you will, but the potential for collaborative effort here is phenomenal, and cross-border activity. I mean, I'm looking at the plan, and you know, Solihull's nearly as big as Birmingham actually in geographical areas. Just it hasn't got so much buildings in it. You know, you think, what's the relationship between those the green infrastructure there?
Chair, I'll just add one more thing, if I may. When there's talked about criteria and forms that go from, say, from councils down to local communities, my plea is that I've often found forms that have been complicated, and it puts them fear. So if you can make it as easy as possible for communities in particular to understand what they're going to fill in, rather than reams of paper they give up. That's just a plea.
Well, that's what happens with things like lottery and lottery grants, and they really are quite tough.
Yes.
And I mean, I think locally what I've found is having somebody who can just point in the right direction.
Yeah, exactly.
Because some of the forms I suspect will, you know, they won't be from us, they'll be from others.
Yeah.
And they won't be sure. But the more we can help people through that morass, because they don't want to do that, they want to put trees in the ground,
Exactly. Yeah.
not mess around with it.
My point. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, are we okay with that then? Are we finished with that? Thank you very much. I'm speaking loudly because I keep thinking like that. I don't know where the microphone is, but I'm not shouting, of course. So we'll move on to right, energy capital governance, which is Matthew.
Yeah, thanks very much. This is just hopefully a very brief item. I just wanted the board to note that we're undertaking a governance review of energy capital, which is relevant to this group because I'm here as chair of Energy Capital. This is the governance mechanism for Energy Capital, essentially. And it is important, which I'll just explain in a minute. So it's important. The reason I wanted to make you aware of it is because we're going to initiate a process. I don't want to try and do the process today. I just want to make you aware that we're going to do it and explain why I think it's important. So there's two reasons we're doing it, really. One is local, which is WM 2041 said recommended that we set up a net zero infrastructure delivery board. I think it's called panel, which Ed touched on earlier. So we're implementing that recommendation, and we've got to decide what form that takes. So I think it's been decided that was an energy capital, and therefore that's part of the schedule we're looking at. And the second reason is external, and this is, I think, from my perspective, quite significant, which is that the energy sector, the energy infrastructure sector in particular, is now moving very rapidly and is being pushed by government to seek greater local authority input into its decision-making processes. So they are being asked to consult local authorities in a better way, and they are seeing this energy net zero infrastructure panel as a means to do that for the West Midlands. So it has direct echoes of what we've just been talking about, where, from my understanding of that conversation, we'll be talking about the local environmental partnerships and how that's part of the national framework, but there needs to be a local mechanism in place there. And we have excellent relationships with, so the distinction in terms of, I've been around for a while now, but for a long time we've been pushing the government and pushing nationally to say we want greater local engagement in energy decision making, energy markets. But actually now the country is safe, and so it's coming for the whole country. There's a desire to do that, and we've got to decide how we respond. So we've got good relationships with Western Power, Cadent, National Grid, Seven Trends, all these kind of organisations, but they are privately regulated monopolies. They are, and the monopoly word's interesting, so they are in a position to exploit citizens of the country if they wish, and they're commercial organisations. So they are regulated to prevent them doing that, to try and get the best outcomes for the country. Currently that is national, and it will become more local, and they're still doing net zero and carbon. So the question is how we do that as a region, how we make sure we get the best outcome from those organisations, where they talk about the gas, the electricity, hydrogen, where they make it available to us. And we have local authorities and members of this board have varying interests in that, and it varies over time. So the kind of point where this comes to the head, and it's such a point, you get very enthusiastic about hydrogen as the city of Coventry or Birmingham or Wolverhampton, and you can say you want buses, but you need a supply of hydrogen to make those buses and so on work. And at one extreme, and this is how it operates today, when the West Midlands or Coventry or Birmingham get hydrogen, or when they get ability to manage their electricity network in a smart way, is entirely in the gift of Western Power or Cadent, and they have a plan. And I'm now beginning to get into more than the fingers of one hand, a number of occasions in the last 10 years when I have gone to those organisations and said, I have a fantastic project in the Black Country to get factories to work together to trade their power and save them 10% on their energy costs. We want to do it now. We can get some funding, and Western Power say, and they are nice people, and they just, our plan is to provide that technology into that little network in 2027. So you may have a group that wants to do something, you may have an opportunity to save money for your local industry, you may have an opportunity to actually keep industry in the area, keep jobs in the area. But our plan, and it's being signed off by government, is not to provide you with the technology. So we're rolling it out from Cornwall. That's a real example. And it's not just Western Power, Cadent, we talk about hydrogen. They are investing in Liverpool at the moment and Manchester. And if you have an industrial process which needs hydrogen, which is probably, buses you can have options, but industrial processes to be clean might well need hydrogen if they involve certain types of combustion, then you have no incentive to locate in the West Midlands anymore. You will go to Liverpool, or you will go to West Coventry, gigafactory, you need electricity infrastructure. These are the decisions where local governments want to get involved and need to get involved, and government does understand this, and it's pushing that down. So what we need to decide as a region is whether we delegate that to the combined authority to do, to a panel working with the infrastructure providers, and there's strong arguments to pay for that because the expertise required is quite high, and how members and local authorities want to get involved in that process, whether this board and someone like me and Ed, indeed, and Cheryl, who comes from sports sometimes as well, can represent the interests of local authorities as well, or whether we need to get into the nitty-gritty actually of the plans and the configuration of Solihull or Birmingham, which actually, in my view, that is a big element of this as well. This is at the level of spatial planning and so on, which local authorities do best. So all those things need to be considered. Can't put that on the table, but I wanted you to know that we're very, very keen to engage with local authorities to get this right in the next 2 or 3 months, and to put in place a structure which enables this region to kind of represent itself back into this very big, very powerful thing that is the UK energy system, which has a really big impact on our economies and our lives. So, if it's the Black Country, this is not my language. This is an existential threat the transition to net zero and the way the infrastructure companies choose to do it, to the economy of that country and the identity of that country. Because you can't do kind of things that that country's been doing for the last 200 years anymore in the black country, and the commercial logic says no, the best place to do that is actually in Newcastle, and that's where the money will go, and we'll have to think of better things to do in that country. It matters. So I'm hoping that when we come and knock on all your doors in the next 2 months, the local authorities speaking talkers and prepared for this. It's difficult. I know it's difficult. I know it's technical, but it is really important.
Okay, thanks. That was really useful. As you can I make a suggestion, because this is not, I think you said we weren't intending to debate the merits of this, and I don't propose that we would do that. But what I do think we should debate or at least question is the process that we're going through. You're talking about going to local authorities, and I think what needs to be understood is the sheer volume of stuff people are dealing with. And honestly, the moment the word governance comes into it, people seriously switch off. And I think you need to reshape. I don't know if you prepared a paper ready to go out, but I think it needs to be, benefits to the local authority, what's in it for me, and make sure those things come out, because I always think headings need to set the story. And if you, and I often do this myself, but I think if you say issues and options, I think you should have headings like why this is good for local authorities, what the changes will be, why this system is better, current system, proposed system. That's the way you need to demonstrate this. I don't know what your format is, but that's my suggestion anyway. I'm welcome for anyone else who's going to contribute.
Chair, if I could just add, very much welcome those notions we talked about on energy capital. And I think that certainly with the Mets, etc. But I think that one of the things that, as we look today with the public, which we're seeing price rises, and I know, I guess to the chair, is that people are and aren't bothered with going on with various people in these. It's good that it's happening, but I think that with residents, they are concerned about their personal finance, of course, with and what have you, and they're looking for better and quicker ways to help reduce the costs and to improve their homes and businesses, as well as reducing and heading towards a net zero. So I think if the public that are listening now, they're probably thinking, yes, so support all that you're doing there on energy capital, but what Mr. and Mrs. whose word politely Joe public are looking for is those things. What ways? And it's not going to be an overnight thing, Chair. It's going to take a while, but they're all saying, how on earth can we talk to people to reduce the energy costs while we're still walking along that way? I think you're going to come in.
If I could just answer the question, because I try and do it by example. You talk to informed people in the energy sector, and I'm going to quote the catapult here, the energy system catapult building. Greater local engagement in these processes should save up to 20–30% more energy costs. There's a kind of vision there, which people talk about. But when you turn that into the practical reality, how do you do that? What you're actually talking about is instead of at the moment, there's a risk that you get a neighbourhood. I'm creating a bit of an example here, but a neighbourhood's decided to opt for heat pumps because it can, whatever conditions are. So it doesn't need gas in. But because the national regulatory system can't see that, it's still going to charge those people through the system the cost of the gas infrastructure. And to get away from that, you need the local, someone who understands that town or that bit of the city, to be talking to the utility companies and preventing them planning to put gas into a bit which doesn't need it. And that interaction is not happening at the moment in an efficient way. So those opportunities to make the system more cost effective are being lost. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's how we communicate that to people. It's the value of local planning in some ways.
It's a different question. I was talking about the benefits to local authorities. What we're saying here is benefits to people, which is an extension of that process. You know, what we're doing now and why this is better, so we can pick that on board.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about it from a combined authority governance perspective, which I think, Councillor Courts, is what you were referring to, because I can see at the moment, you know, local authority leaders and others being very cautious about new governance and so on. I would estimate, Dan could probably tell us, that the amount of time that combined authority governance meetings focus on transport is a good 50, 60, 70% of all the conversations that are had. And we could calculate the kind of transport budget and how much we're actually talking about in that. And of course, with TFWM being part of the combined authority, it's inevitable that we're going to spend 70 or 80% of our time talking about a large budget. I think the point that Matthew is making, and I certainly sympathise with, is that because it's less visible, there's a massive energy infrastructure system going on in our streets, in our business districts and so on. And it's worth a vast sum of money in the same way as the transport system is worth a vast sum of money. And yet we expend hardly any time or effort worrying about it.
It's not the fact, it becomes most visible when people want to invest in there, whether they want to come and live there, or whether they want to build a factory there, right? And that's where the value lies.
I think what we're trying to say is that there is a need for local authorities to be facilitated to have those conversations in the same way as they have transport conversations. And we're trying to find the best mechanism.
I get that, and I think we're in danger of talking about substance rather than the form. What I'm talking about is the form. You see, you've just made a very important point, but I don't think it's made in the paper.
No.
And you know, that's what I'm saying. Those things need to come out, because transport does, you know, at the end of the day, the whole net zero is about energy. It's all about energy, you know, how you use it, how you get rid of it, and so on. So I just think in the process terms, you just need, you know, if you're, you know, it's going to be quite difficult to sell this to local authorities who will fasten on the word governance in the substance. So you need to do a good selling job, is what I'm saying.
Yep.
It's not the product, it's how you sell it. It's what we're talking about, that marketing.
And very practically, we're talking to all of the local authority net zero directors about this next Monday. So it's very firmly on their radars.
Okay, all right, we'll press on, because I realise I think we're almost out of time. I don't know whether the battery goes off at 11:30, but Energy Collaboration Days, which is a verbal report.
So that's me. And we will circulate a paper about this, but we really wanted to use this opportunity of coming to Tyseley Energy Park today to float an idea that we've floated with Tyseley Energy Park and the Midlands Energy Hub, which is that at the moment, the energy system, if I can put it in those terms, is incredibly fragmented. There's brilliant things going on all around the region, but people tend not to talk to each other as much as they could or they should. So the very simple idea is that once a month, we get as many of those people as we possibly can to all come and locate upstairs in that space that we saw earlier and work together. They can use it as hot desking space to do their ordinary day-to-day work, but we'll also put on lunch, we'll put on some seminars, we'll perhaps provide shuttle bus service in and out of New Street or wherever else to make it really, really easy for people to get here. And the idea is that we actually then create that networking and so on. There's also a little bit of a nudge here, Dan not limiting, which is that we would hope that Midlands Energy Hub, for example, may want to ultimately locate some of their staff that are currently based in Nottingham. They might actually want to locate staff in a place like this as well. So we're kind of nudging in that direction. So that's effectively the idea. But given that we were coming here today, we thought it would be good just to flag that as an opportunity. And other agencies and colleagues on the call, when we kind of get the programme up and running in the new year, we would really encourage you to just choose to take that day, that month, and actually just come, bring your laptop and work here, rather than working in your ordinary offices, so that we can get that synergy, that serendipity that we hope that you can create.
It's good. Okay. Right. Next meeting, there's no AOB, but I'm not sure that nobody's talked about AOB, so I'm assuming, oh, there is an AOB. Jim, yeah.
Yeah, hello. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, Jim from the Environment Agency, standing in for Suzanne Ward. I just wanted to flag up that we have launched our Climate Change Adaptation Plan, or SWM have, and we worked in collaboration with them and Combined Authority also. It's out. It was launched yesterday. I can come back and give you a proper presentation on it, but I just wanted to flag up. It picks up a lot of what you've said about communities. Highest deprivation are at most at risk of climate change impacts. We want to then target those communities, and on the back of levelling up, building green recovery. So the similarities between what you're doing with those sort of targeting the communities that need it for green space, also for those environmental improvements, all tied into sort of post-COVID. And nature-based solutions, but it is out there. I have passed the links to Dan. Please have a look at read. It's a stepping stone. It's the strategic view, an adaptation plan, and a risk assessment. SWM are really good at this sort of thing, and we hope to take it forward into phase 2, where we will really build in that impact on communities linked to deprivation, linked to economic recovery, and a lot of the things you've said today. So I'll leave it there because time is short, but I'm glad it's out. It's great. I'll promote it.
Thank you, Jim. So we'll look forward to that. I mean, one of the things you're sort of focusing on is, I mean, a lot of effort on and focus on sort of net zero, climate change, and some of those things. But the resilience element is something else, and we really do need to be very, very alive to resilience, because we haven't actually got the solutions to 2041, 2050. And the 1.5 degrees, because last time I looked, it was more like 3 degrees, and resilience is really going to come in, to its own. Jackie, it looks like you are wanting to say something.
Yes, so we've been talking to SWM about this adaptation plan. I think it's got 76 different actions in, and is for the whole West Midlands region. And we've got plans to then look at those that are relevant for the CA area. And maybe pick the top few and really do some detailed work around some of the adaptation initiatives, actions we can put in place for the CA area. So Jim wouldn't necessarily know that, but yeah, we've been linking with SWM on that.
Excellent.
It's the resilience. It's just building in that, as you say, resilience. We can't have net zero without resilient economy, resilient communities. So brilliant. That's been going on. Alan Carr mentioned something yesterday about that, Jackie, but yeah, great stuff.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was just wondering, Jim, thank you for that. Knowing what has been done with the grants, etc., for green spaces, is it possible we could see a copy, so it's kind of linking? I think it's January 2022 when you start to do your green.
So we've got the
plan.
launch, yeah.
I was thinking of syncing them up together. So yeah, that would be helpful, Chair. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right, we've done on that. So move on to well, date of the next meeting. It's just 6th of January, but I don't think we're doing 6th of January.
No, 3rd of March.
3rd of March. Okay. Are we going anywhere interesting?
Would you like to go somewhere interesting?
Well, I'd always like to go somewhere.
Okay, we'll think of somewhere to go.
It, but
yeah, no, my dog similarly, but what can you do?
Like she's not able to join in, but yeah. Well, I do know. It's what I said right at the beginning. We need, I'd like content that actually is of interest to people.
Okay.
And interests people in these people.
Yeah.
As well as learns about it. So have a think about it. We've been quite happy to do stuff online. I mean, just meeting in office in Birmingham, doesn't think helps at all.
No.
But a demonstrate and visit. So okay, thank you very much for your time. Okay,
Thank you.
Not too only 5 minutes over.
Agree with that, Chair. You can't be to silence.
You can't be a site.